Emma flipped the wedding invitation back and forth. It had arrived at her house by mail. The sender's name was clearly printed. The Patterson family. No handwritten note. No embossed name of the recipient, just a cold, machine-printed line. You are invited to the wedding of Abby Patterson and Michael Hughes. She sighed, placed the card down on the table, and sank into the sofa, as if the weight of an old memory had suddenly settled onto her shoulders. Abby, her cousin, 3 years younger, was the family's golden girl. Every family wedding was an opportunity to show off the children, and people like Emma, single, living alone, working a desk job, were always seen as a misfit in the perfect family portrait. And Michael. That name made her chest tighten, even though she had told herself repeatedly, that's all in the past. Michael Hughes had once been her best friend from high school. They grew up together, played in the same garage band, shared sandwiches at the kitchen table every Saturday afternoon. He was the first to read her short stories, the only one who knew she feared deep water but loved the ocean. And then one day he started dating Abby. Emma never blamed Michael. She had no right. She'd never confessed her feelings. She had simply pulled away, declined meetups, said she was busy. Gradually, the distance grew so wide that they no longer spoke at all. When she heard they had broken up last year, Emma didn't feel happy. Just empty, like the person she'd once been closest to had become nothing more than a name in a family photo hung in her uncle's living room. What puzzled Emma the most wasn't the invitation. It was the text from her mother a few days later. Remember to wear something nice. And don't sit alone at the reception like last year. People will say you haven't moved on. Emma read that message 3 times. People? Who exactly? The relatives who routinely categorized her under poor single girl? Or the ones who whispered behind her back things like, she used to like Michael. Tried to keep him, couldn't, now she's all quiet and bitter. Whoever they were, she was all too familiar with those judgments. She smiled faintly and replied, I'll wear something nice. But I'll still be me. The wedding took place on a Saturday afternoon in early autumn, when the leaves had turned brick red and the air carried the crisp bite of the coming season. Emma wore a navy blue dress, simple yet elegant. Her hair was tied in a low bun, and she wore light makeup. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she didn't see someone trying to impress anyone. She just saw herself mature, grounded, and smiling for no one but herself. The ceremony was held in a large garden on the outskirts of town. Guests had gathered, soft music played, and white wine filled every glass. Emma arrived, receiving a few nods from distant relatives, accompanied by the familiar glance that seemed to say, Came alone again, did you? She was standing next to the juice table, about to pour herself a second glass when she heard a voice call out from the reception desk. Oh, Emma. You made it. We were placing bets on when you'd show up. It was Aunt Carol, her mother's older sister, famous for a laugh louder than the band. I'm right on time, Emma replied with a smile. Sure. And you look lovely. But still no one's managed to tie you down, huh? The family's been joking, the last one still standing. Laughter erupted from a few nearby relatives. Emma smiled a practiced smile she had perfected over the years, one that looked untouched by judgment. I prefer watching from the sidelines. No one tries to steal my seat that way, she answered, voice light as air. Careful, stay too still and you'll start growing moss, an uncle teased. Emma nodded, still smiling, but her fingers tightened slightly around the glass. She turned away before hearing anything more. Finding a seat near the row of trees, Emma sat down and pulled out her phone, opening the Notes app. She didn't post anything online, just typed a single line. Kindness is never their first instinct. It's always sarcasm, then silence. The reception began. Music rose. The bride Abby appeared radiant, arm linked with her mother. Michael. Nowhere in sight. Then the MC announced, due to special circumstances, the groom will appear later. But first, please welcome the groom's best man, Michael Hughes, for a speech on his friend's behalf. Emma froze. Michael wasn't the groom? The lively room suddenly quieted, as though it had just swallowed a secret. And then footsteps echoed slow, steady, and Michael appeared on the elaborately decorated stage. His hair was longer now, his face thinner, but his eyes still the same eyes that once told Emma, I always feel safe when you're around. and then he looked straight at her. Emma stood motionless as Michael stepped up to the podium. Not because he had changed, but because every eye in the room was fixed on him, as if waiting for a play no one had ever seen the script to. The microphone gave a soft pop as he touched it. Michael took a deep breath, then smiled not joyfully but sincerely, quietly. "Hi everyone. I'm Michael Hughes. And before you ask, where's the groom? I'm afraid today's event isn't exactly what everyone expected." Whispers rose from the front rows. Someone coughed quietly. The MC rushed forward, but Michael held up a hand. "It's okay. Just give me a few minutes." Emma sat frozen. She felt a chill seep through her dress, as if someone had just flung open a door to the memories she had locked away for years. Michael continued. "Abby and I broke up over a year ago. But both families, especially Abishad, already planned the wedding and didn't want to waste the effort. I agreed to be the best man because I wanted a chance to finally say something I've kept in for far too long." He glanced around the room. And when his gaze stopped on Emma, the entire room seemed to fall into a hush. "There was someone who used to be my best friend," Michael said, his voice lowering. "She knew what I liked before I even realized it myself. She could tell when I was lying. And she was the one I lost because I didn't have enough courage." Someone dropped a plate. A gasp echoed. Emma felt her heart pounding so hard it hurt to breathe. But she didn't look away. She kept her eyes on Michael, just like she had back then when he needed someone to quietly stand beside him. "I don't know why I chose silence all those years," he said. "Maybe I thought I had time. Maybe I convinced myself she'd move on, find someone else." He paused and took a deep breath. "But when I heard people laugh and call her the one who hasn't moved on, I realized they were wrong. She didn't stop. She went further than any of us. She just never looked back to demand anyone follow." Emma's fingers tightened. Inside her was a storm of emotions: anger, tenderness, disbelief, and something she hadn't dared name: hope. Michael placed a hand over his chest. "I'm not here today to get married. I'm here to do what I should have done years ago, to apologize. And to ask her if there's still a chance for me to start over." The room was completely still. The soft amber light washed over his face and over Emma's, now flushed not from embarrassment, but because she felt seen, for the first time in a very long while. Aunt Carol leaned toward someone beside her and whispered, "Is he talking about Emma?" No one answered. But everyone knew. Emma stood up, walking slowly toward the stage. With every step, memories surged back: Michael singing off-key with his guitar. The days they skipped class to eat ice cream. The brief but deep hugs. And the years she labeled her own heart foolish for holding on to a love that had no name. When she reached him, she didn't speak right away. She just stood beside Michael, her eyes locking with his as if they were reading each other in a language no one else in the room could understand. Then Emma said, "I used to think if someone truly loved you, they'd never make you wait." Michael and the whole room held their breath. "But today I think differently. Some love needs time, not to grow, but to become brave enough." She turned to him. "If you're brave enough to say it, then I'm brave enough to listen." Applause echoed, not loud, not dramatic. Just steady claps of acknowledgement. The MC awkwardly returned to the microphone. Thank you. And the party will still go on as planned, just with a slightly different purpose." Laughter erupted, light and far more genuine than any congratulatory words said earlier. Emma returned to her table, and Michael sat beside her. They didn't say much. She passed him a piece of cake. He poured her a glass of water. And all the words that had never been spoken didn't need to be rushed anymore. After the wedding, or rather, the non-wedding, Emma returned to the hotel with her thoughts spinning like the surface of a lake disturbed by a stone too big. What she had expected to be another night of hiding in a corner from the pitying looks of relatives had turned into something else entirely. Not because she was the one who still hadn't moved on, as the family used to joke, but because someone she had buried in a locked drawer of memory had just told the whole room that he was wrong. She didn't fall asleep right away. The hotel room light was warm and soft, but her mind felt lit by 100 bulbs at once. Emma opened her suitcase and dug out an old leather notebook she always carried on trips, not to write, but to remind herself not to. But tonight she opened it. The first page began with a date from nearly 10 years ago. The handwriting was neat and rounded. Tuesday. Michael asked if I'd be willing to perform at the school fundraiser. I said probably not, and he quietly pulled me on stage. I trembled the whole time and just watched him play the guitar. But afterward he turned and said, "Do you know why I wanted you up there? Because I think you're better than you believe." I didn't respond, but in my head all I wanted to say was, "I believe in you even more than I believe in myself." Second page. Then the third. Some sections were crossed out in red ink, or blacked out as if the Emma of the past hadn't dared to look back at what she had written. Those pages weren't love ballads. They were sighs. Observations. Moments when Emma wrote about Michael without using his name, calling him he, as if to convince herself not to hope too much. Today he said he's dating Abby. I smiled and congratulated him like a scene I had rehearsed. But when I got home, I stood in front of the mirror and asked, "So I'm just the narrator, never the main character, huh?" Emma smiled not because it was funny, but because she finally realized. Maybe she had spent years not loving anyone, not because no one was good enough, but because she had never truly paused to forgive herself for staying silent too long. Her phone buzzed. A message. "Michael, I know it's late, but if you're still awake I'd like to see you." Emma stared at the screen, fingers hesitating. Then she typed, "Emma. Hotel lobby." When Emma walked into the lobby, Michael was already there on the sofa, holding 2 cups of hot cocoa. She sat across from him, saying nothing at first. He handed her a cup. "I remember you always preferred cocoa over coffee," Michael said with a soft smile. Emma nodded, accepted the cup, then looked straight into his eyes. "So what you said today, was it real?" Michael exhaled, his gaze softening like a confession no longer needing to hide. "It was real. I've stayed silent for years, because I thought you deserved someone better. And I wasn't sure I could be that person." Emma laughed, but there was a tremble in it. "And while you stayed silent, you let people think I never got over you, as if I was some shadow clinging to the past. Do you know how much that hurt?" Michael looked down. "I know. And I don't expect forgiveness overnight. But I hope you'll give me a chance to be beside you this time, the right way." They sat in silence for a while. The space between them was no longer a gap, it was something that needed to be filled with sincerity, not time. Emma took a sip of her cocoa. "I don't need you to come running in to save anyone, Michael." He nodded. "And I'm not here to be a hero. I'm here because I can't let anyone else define you, not ever again." That night, when Emma returned to her room, she didn't reopen her journal. She placed it gently on the desk and closed it. Not because the story didn't need to be continued, but because, for the first time, someone had started writing it with her. The next morning, the sky was crystal clear, as if the universe had decided to gift her a brand new beginning. Sunlight streamed through the hotel curtains, illuminating the bed where Emma lay still half asleep. She opened her eyes, mind groggy, but her heart was strangely light, like her soul had finally shed an old coat soaked in memory. The post-wedding brunch, still on schedule, was set to be a cozy gathering. Emma debated whether to go. But then she reminded herself, if I skip it just to avoid being talked about, how is that any different from the past 5 years? Emma chose a simple ivory dress, tied her hair half up, and wore a soft pink lipstick. She wasn't trying to impress. She just wanted to show up for the first time, not to shield herself from mockery, but to speak on her own terms. When she arrived, the room was already filled with light laughter, the clinking of cutlery, and the warm scent of cinnamon rolls. People looked up in mild surprise as she walked in, but this time no one said. She came alone again. Because Michael was standing in the back, and his eyes lit up when he saw her. He made his way toward her, not grabbing her hand, but with a gaze so clear that everyone watching could see. The story had changed. Emma chose a table by the window. As she sat down, the MC suddenly stepped forward, mic in hand. "Before we raise a toast to a day that didn't follow tradition but brought beautiful surprises, we'd like to invite someone to speak, someone who we believe deserves the chance to tell her side of the story." The MC turned to her. "Emma, if you're willing?" Every eye in the room turned to her. A year ago she would have panicked. 6 months ago she would have politely declined. But today Emma simply smiled, stood up, and walked to the front. She took the mic, inhaled deeply. "Hello everyone," she began, her voice clear but gentle. I'm Emma. And perhaps some of you here know me as the one who still hasn't moved on, or the longtime single girl. Soft chuckles filled the room. But this time the laughter wasn't sharp, it was curious, as if being led somewhere unexpected. Emma continued, I'm not here to argue or complain. I just want to share this. Sometimes a person's silence isn't weakness. It's because they carry a story too big, and no one's ever had the patience to listen. She paused, her gaze sweeping over familiar faces. I once loved, and I once stayed silent. Not because I was afraid to speak, but because I believed in the right moment. I believed that if someone truly cared, they would know. And if they didn't, well, that was okay too. I would still live, work, love life, and wait until my heart felt peaceful enough to say, I loved right. She looked at Michael. He was watching her, eyes locked, unblinking. Yesterday, something unexpected happened. Not because I was called out, but because for the first time I was truly seen, not a shadow, not a joke at a wine table. She turned back to the room. I want to thank you all. Because thanks to those careless jokes, I learned resilience. Thanks to whispers behind my back, I learned to stand tall. And thanks to the one person brave enough to step into a crowd and say he was wrong, I learned that sometimes the bravest person isn't the one who shows up first, but the one who comes back at just the right time. The room fell silent. One beat, then another. Then applause erupted, first a few, then more, then all. Not because Emma's words were eloquent, but because, in everything she said, everyone saw a piece of themselves. Misunderstood, labeled, waiting for someone to truly see them. After the party, many people came to shake Emma's hand. Aunt Carol gave her a hug for the first time in years and whispered, I'm sorry if the things I said before ever hurt you. I always thought it was just teasing. Emma smiled. And now I'm truly happy, not because of what anyone said, but because I finally know who I am. Michael waited until almost everyone had left. He walked up to her and gently took her hand. I didn't know you still kept those journal pages. Emma nodded. I didn't think I'd ever read them again. But last night I did, and for the first time, I saw I wasn't as weak as I once believed. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. And for the first time I know I'm strong enough to stand beside you, not as a friend, but as someone who won't leave again. The two of them left the reception hall just as the sun began to set. A soft breeze blew through Emma's hair. She didn't need anyone to tell her she looked beautiful. Didn't need anyone to say, you're finally loved. Because for the first time in years she felt seen, heard, and chosen. Not out of pity, but because she was worthy. That afternoon, after the emotional celebration, Michael invited Emma to take a walk through the small park behind the wedding venue. They strolled slowly side by side, occasionally letting the wind fill the silence in a comforting way. No one rushed to talk about the future. They simply walked, two people who had become used to guarding themselves, now learning to be unguarded. Michael looked straight ahead and said quietly, I kept thinking about last night. Emma tilted her head. The speech part.
No.
The look in your eyes when I stepped up there. I was terrified. I was afraid you'd stand up, walk out of that room and never look back. She smiled, half sad, half gentle. I was afraid too. I was afraid I wouldn't be brave enough to hear you out. But I stayed, not to give you a chance, but to give myself a chance to end the silence. They sat down on a stone bench beneath a tree. Michael leaned back on his hands and looked up at the clear sky. Do you remember when you convinced me to ditch prom and get tacos in the Mexican district? He chuckled. Emma burst out laughing. I was in a ball gown, and you took off your jacket in the middle of the street. That night, I wanted to tell you something. But I didn't. Emma turned to him. What was it? That I felt safest when I was with you. No need to try hard. No need to be interesting. Just me. She looked at him, her eyes glowing with something quiet. And then you chose Abby, she said, not bitterly, just a gentle reminder. Michael nodded. I chose a relationship I thought I should have. Not the one I wanted. And in doing so, I lost you. A breeze passed through, scattering a few leaves onto the sidewalk. Emma bent down and picked up a red leaf, turning it gently in her fingers. You know, Michael, I wasn't sad because you chose someone else. I was sad because you never asked how I felt. I stayed your friend. I kept smiling. And you never saw how exhausted I was from trying to be the background to your happiness. Michael was silent.
No excuses. No justifications.
Just a look in his eyes that said, I know I was wrong. After a moment, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I found this in an old box. It's a letter you wrote for my 18th birthday but never gave me. Emma unfolded it. Her own handwriting stared back awkward but full of emotion. Michael, if one day you feel lost, remember, I'm still here. Maybe you won't turn around. But if you do, I'll be the one standing right there, not moving forward, not stepping back. I don't need you to choose me. I just need you to remember I existed. Not just as a best friend, but as someone who once loved you very quietly. Emma bit her lip. I wrote that after I saw you two kiss by the bleachers. Michael closed his eyes. I'm sorry. They sat in silence for a while. Then Emma spoke, her voice light. You don't need to apologize anymore. I forgave you a long time ago. But I needed to hear you say it so I could be sure I no longer need silence to move forward. Michael turned toward her and took her hand. Then if I told you I don't want to lose you again, what would you say? Emma looked into his eyes. For a long moment, I'd say don't make me teach you how to love from scratch. But if you're willing to learn, I won't drop the class halfway. They both burst into laughter. But in that laughter was a lightness, a quiet acknowledgement that they were no longer just two people staring silently across a gulf of old mistakes. As they left the park, Michael extended his hand not to grab hers, but simply to hold it beside her. Emma looked down, then slipped her hand into his, not quite a promise, but a quiet nod to something that might begin. That night, Emma opened her journal once again. She didn't write much, just one line. For the first time, I'm not writing for someone else. I'm writing for myself. To remember that I stayed. The next morning, just as Emma finished making her morning coffee, a message popped up unexpectedly on her screen. Abby Patterson. Are you free this afternoon? I'd like to meet just the two of us. Emma froze for a moment. Abby, the girl the whole family had assumed would be the bride the night beforehand, had a direct conversation with her in years. Ever since Michael and Abby had started dating, the relationship between the cousins had slowly drifted apart like two rivers no longer sharing the same course. Emma replied. 3 p.m. Solstice Cafe downtown. She had no idea what Abby wanted to say. But if there was one thing she'd learned from the past few days, it was this. Some conversations needed to happen, not to forgive, but to end what had never been said. Abby arrived on time, wearing a cream sweater, no makeup, looking more tired than usual, but her eyes were different. They no longer had that dazzling pride Emma once knew. They both ordered drinks. Emma chose ginger tea. Abby ordered a mocha. Thanks for coming. Abby started. Emma nodded. I wanted to listen. Abby lightly gripped her cup. I know what happened last night shocked everyone. But I want you to know I was the one who asked Michael to speak. Emma looked stunned. You what? Abby nodded. Michael and I truly ended things last year. We kept it quiet because my grandmother was sick. My family insisted on going through with the wedding. They called Michael the perfect groom. And you know how it is in our family, once someone's labeled ideal, they start performing instead of living. Emma stayed quiet. Not because she didn't believe it, but because she had never imagined that Abby, the one always praised for being perfect, had ever felt like she was performing too. I knew he used to like you, Abby said directly, her voice steady. Even when we were dating, Michael's eyes always turned elsewhere when you were around. Emma opened her mouth to say something, but Abby raised her hand. No, don't deny it. I don't blame you. You didn't do anything wrong. But I hated you for it. I hated you because you didn't have to do anything, didn't have to say anything, and still, he looked at you like you were the one. Her voice caught, not from anger, but from finally being honest. One day, Abby continued, I realized I didn't hate you. I hated myself for staying in a relationship we both knew wasn't real. I accepted being the bride for status, for family, for expectations. But I knew if I didn't stop it, the one who'd hurt the most wouldn't be, might'd be Michael. Emma whispered. So you planned all of it? I did, Abby nodded. I told him to go up there and say everything. I told my parents I was sick, stayed in the car, and waited until he finished his speech. Emma's eyes widened. And then I left, Abby said with a shrug. Not to run away but to let everyone understand. Not everyone in a wedding dress is a bride. And not everyone standing next to the groom is the one he loves. They both sat in silence. Not tense. Not awkward. Just a necessary pause between two women who once thought they were rivals, but were really just caught in different roles. Abby sipped her mocha, then looked at Emma. I'm sorry for what I said that you still haven't moved on. Turns out you were just moving toward the right thing, while I was rushing in the wrong direction. Emma smiled gently. You know, I used to think I was weak for not fighting back. But now I think choosing silence can also be a way to stand up, just has to be the right moment. Abby smiled. Will you forgive me? I think I already did. I just never had the chance to say it. When they left the cafe, the sky had dimmed. The last light of the day filtered through trees shedding their leaves. Abby walked toward her car. Emma stood watching. Before closing the car door, Abby turned back. I hope that when you move forward this time it's because you truly want to, not because someone pushed you. Emma nodded. And I hope you'll be chosen not because you're perfect, but because you're real. That night Emma told Michael everything. He simply listened, holding her hand. When she finished, he lowered his head, resting his forehead gently against hers. So all three of us were keeping secrets and now, none of us have to anymore. Emma nodded, whispering, it's time to love as ourselves, not as someone else's idea of who we should be. A week after the wedding with no bride, a small family gathering was held at Emma's grandparents' old wooden house, the place the Patterson family had traditionally used for holiday reunions. This time the reason was to clear things up, according to Aunt Carol, who conveniently seemed to forget she was the first one to laugh when she called Emma, the one who hasn't moved forward. Emma didn't know what to expect. But when Michael gently squeezed her hand before they walked through the door, she knew that no matter what happened, she wouldn't be standing alone this time. The living room was brightly lit, dishes clinking in the kitchen. Relatives had already begun arriving. But when Emma and Michael entered together, the room briefly paused like someone had accidentally dropped the soundtrack. Aunt Carol was the first to speak. Oh, you two made it. We were just about to get started. Emma smiled politely, and Michael nodded in greeting. They sat down on the long sofa, facing those who once laughed, once whispered, once treated her love life as ideal dinner gossip. Uncle Henry, the one who cared most about appearances, spoke up. Michael, you should know what you did the other day made a lot of people uncomfortable. Luckily Abby was understanding. But you should have told the family first. Michael sat up straight, still holding Emma's hand. I understand. And I don't expect approval. I just didn't want to start anything new with a lie. Silence returned. Emma looked around the room. Then she stood. May I say a few words? No one objected. In fact, it seemed like everyone was waiting for her to speak. Emma took a deep breath. I know that all these years I've been the good daughter, never made a fuss, never talked back, never cried at the dinner table. And every time someone joked that I didn't have a boyfriend, I just smiled. She paused. The room was completely silent. But maybe people don't realize. Sometimes the deepest pain doesn't come from rejection, but from being treated as if you're not even worth noticing. Emma's gaze moved across every face in the room. No one dared meet her eyes. I don't blame anyone, she continued. But today I want to ask one thing. Please stop defining a woman by whether she's married, has children, or when she's going to settle down. Because sometimes we are moving forward, just not in the direction you're used to. A gentle round of applause rose not from family, but from Mr. Walter, the elderly neighbor who rarely spoke. He nodded and said quietly, she's right. Folks should have been listening to her a long time ago. Michael stood and took Emma's hand. And for anyone who still doubts, I just want to say this. I've never been more certain about anything in my life. Emma is the one I love. Not because she's perfect, but because she's brave enough not to pretend to be someone she's not. Emma looked at him, her eyes so warm they softened the entire room's air. Aunt Carol sighed. I'm sorry, Emma. I didn't realize the things I said weighed on you like that. Emma smiled. I don't want anyone to apologize. I just want everyone to understand. Silence doesn't always mean acceptance. And laughter doesn't always mean agreement. After that, the atmosphere lightened. Someone offered tea. Someone changed the subject. But something had shifted forever, like a curtain had finally been pulled back on a room long asleep in old judgments. As they were leaving, a relative who once mocked Emma quietly approached her. "Emma, if you don't mind, could I invite you to speak to the class I teach? About resilience and choosing to live truthfully." Emma was taken aback but then smiled. "I'd be honored." That evening, Emma and Michael sat on the windowsill of her house, watching the soft glow of the street lamp flicker through the curtains. Michael took her hand, whispering, "You don't have to say anything tonight. But if you want to, you can scream." Emma tilted her head toward him. "What if I wake the neighbors?" "You might. But maybe the neighbors need to know you're not staying silent anymore." They both laughed. Then Emma rested her head on Michael's shoulder and said softly, "There was a time I was so afraid of that room. I couldn't even imagine walking in. But today I walked in. Not with a speech, but with my own voice, unexaggerated, unhidden." Michael whispered, "And the room fell silent to hear you." 6 months after the wedding without a bride, Emma and Michael moved to a small lakeside town, more than 200 miles from the city. The town was called Maple Grove, not a standout on any map, but quiet enough for a soul worn down by stairs and expectations to finally heal. The house they rented was a 2-story wooden home with a green roof, a porch covered in vines, and a small garden blooming with lavender. But the most special thing wasn't the scenery, it was the dining table. A long 6-seat wooden table in the middle of the kitchen, where they decided they'd rebuild everything starting with meals. Emma named the table that listens. There every evening they ate together, no phones, no rush, no forced smiles when tired. They shared with each other the things no one else asked about during the day, stories of moments they lost their breath in crowded streets, or simply, "Today you brewed the tea too weak." And it was also at that table that Emma began writing the first pages of her debut book. Those who didn't step wrong just stepped slowly. One evening in March, while it rained gently outside and the windows were speckled with drops, Michael handed Emma a small oak box. It wasn't a ring. It wasn't anything that sparkled. It was a silver spoon. She looked surprised. "It's from the old cooking set you used back in college," he smiled. "I kept it from the first time you made spaghetti and almost set the kitchen on fire." Emma laughed. "Back then I thought, if I can't win your heart, at least I'll leave something that smells good behind." Michael took her hand. "I'm not proposing tonight. No ring. Number 10-step plan. I just want to ask, will you keep cooking with me even if the pot burns? Or the words get salty?" Emma nodded. "As long as this table still hears our laughter, I'll be here." The following month they opened a small bookstore cafe in town, called Still Here. On the back of the menu read the line, "For those once called outdated, offbeat, out of place but never out of heart." They didn't go big. No advertising. But people came for the scent of cinnamon waffles each morning, for the handwritten letters Emma left on the shelves, and for the smile of the cafe owner who always spilled milk when watching his wife from across the counter. One day, a young woman walked into the shop, sat at a table, and said, "You're Emma, right? I saw your speech shared online. I was called a failure all through college. But because of you, I dared to quit a terrible job and pursue writing." Emma sat beside her, didn't ask for a name, just handed her a hot cup of cocoa and whispered, "And now you've taken a step forward in your own true path." That night, Emma wrote in her journal, "I used to think the end of a love story was when 2 people held hands in the rain or kissed under wedding lights. But the real ending is when you can sit at a table and eat well. Even if no one's cheering, just peace. And if anyone asks me again, 'Why did you wait so long to fall in love?' I'll smile and say, 'Because I wanted my table to truly have room for love, not for judgment.'" On the last Sunday of the month, the whole town gathered at Still Here for quiet red night, where anyone could get up and read something. A piece of writing, a poem, or simply a few honest lines. Emma was the final reader. She stood in the glow of candlelight, her voice soft but steady. "I used to be the girl mentioned at a wedding with the joke, the one who never moved forward. But today I'd like to rephrase that. She didn't rush because she was waiting for the right person, the right time, and her right self." Michael stood at the back of the room saying nothing. But his eyes sparkled like every word had already been spoken through presence alone. As Emma stepped down, he took her hand not to prove anything, but simply to say, he was still here. And so was she.